You've seen the stereotype. A ruthless mob boss ruling the city with a towering, razor-thin supermodel on his arm. But what happens when New York's most dangerous man is fiercely, obsessively devoted to his 250-pound wife, and a shallow showgirl makes the deadly mistake of publicly humiliating her? Manhattan's elite always tried to pretend the underworld didn't exist, even when they were drinking its liquor and cashing its checks. On a crisp November evening at the iconic Rainbow Room at the top of Rockefeller Center, the two worlds collided. It was a charity gala for the Children's Hospital, but everyone in the room knew who was really funding the night: the Moretti family. At the center of the room stood Vincent Moretti. He wasn't a caricature from a movie. He was a brutally efficient businessman who controlled the ports from Newark to Brooklyn. Tall, impeccably tailored in a bespoke Tom Ford suit, with a jawline carved from granite and eyes as cold as the East River in February, Vincent was the undisputed king of the city. And sitting quietly at a corner VIP table, sipping sparkling water from a crystal flute, was his queen. Her name was Charlotte. She didn't look like the other women in the room. The wives and girlfriends of Vincent's associates were a sea of identical perfection. Size 0 waists, taut skin, stretched over high cheekbones, wrapped in sheer, clinging Versace, and dripping in diamonds. Charlotte was, undeniably and unapologetically, fat. She wore a size 22. Her body soft and lush, her thick thighs and round stomach draped beautifully in a custom, deep emerald Galia La Havre gown that Vincent had flown a designer in from Tel Aviv to create just for her. She had a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting, warm, expressive, with thick dark hair cascading over her shoulders. To the outside world, their pairing made no sense. The whispers followed Charlotte everywhere she went. Why her? How much money does her father have? Is she a cover? They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that 5 years ago, when a rival family ambushed Vincent outside of Rouse in East Harlem, leaving him bleeding out in a back alley, it was Charlotte, an off-duty trauma nurse, just walking home to her tiny apartment, who dragged his heavy frame behind a dumpster, packed his bullet wounds, and kept him breathing until his men arrived. She hadn't cared about his money or his power. She had just seen a man dying and held his hand through the darkest night of his life. From the moment Vincent woke up in an underground private clinic, he was entirely, terrifyingly devoted to her. He didn't care about her stretch marks or the rolls of her stomach. To Vincent, her body was a sanctuary. She was his peace in a world of violence. But Charlotte still had to live in that world, and the gala tonight was testing her anxiety. "You're quiet," Vincent murmured, appearing suddenly at her side. He handed her a small plate adorned with a delicate crab cake and a miniature twice-baked potato. Even at a high society event, Vincent always made sure she was fed, completely indifferent to the judging eyes of the room. "Just taking it all in," Charlotte said, offering a soft smile. She adjusted the heavy 5-carat Cartier diamond on her left hand. "It's a beautiful event, Vinnie. You did good." Vincent leaned down, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head, his large hand resting protectively on the curve of her hip. "I only did it because you asked, Princess. If it were up to me, I'd be at home on the couch with you, watching those terrible baking shows you like." Charlotte laughed, the sound bright and genuine. For a moment she forgot about the stairs. Across the room, however, a pair of eyes was entirely fixated on Vincent. Chloe Davenport was 23, blonde, and possessed the kind of manufactured, aggressive beauty that demanded attention. She was the lead showgirl at the Velvet Chandelier, an upscale cabaret club Vincent had recently acquired in a hostile takeover. Chloe was fiercely ambitious, entirely ruthless, and utterly delusional. She had spent the last 3 years climbing the ranks of New York's nightlife, using her size 2 figure and manipulative charm to drain the bank accounts of Wall Street brokers. But a broker was nothing compared to Vincent Moretti. Chloe had been brought to the gala as arm candy for one of Vincent's lower-level captains, a man she was already bored with. She had been watching Vincent all night, calculating her move. She noticed he was handsome, powerful, and commanded the absolute terror and respect of every billionaire in the room. What she couldn't understand was the woman sitting next to him. From Chloe's vantage point, Charlotte was an anomaly. Chloe's entire world view was built on the currency of thinness and conventional beauty. To her, a woman of Charlotte's size was invisible, irrelevant, a joke. Chloe assumed Charlotte was a wealthy sister, a disabled relative, or perhaps a charity case Vincent was forced to entertain for public relations. It simply did not compute in Chloe's shallow mind that the most powerful man in New York would willingly choose a fat woman as his romantic partner. "I'm going to introduce myself," Chloe whispered to another dancer standing nearby, smoothing down the sheer fabric of her silver dress. "To the boss? Are you insane?" the other girl hissed. "He doesn't talk to the staff, Chloe. Stay in your lane." "Watch me," Chloe smirked. "Men like that just need to be reminded of what they're missing." The opportunity presented itself 20 minutes later. Vincent's phone buzzed, a heavy encrypted device he only used for critical syndicate business. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. "I have to take this, Princess. Leo's having an issue down at the Red Hook terminal," Vincent said, his voice dropping low so only she could hear. "I'll be in the private smoking lounge. 5 minutes, tops. You need anything before I go?" "I'm fine, Vinny. Go." "I'll just go to the dessert bar," Charlotte smiled, patting his arm. Vincent kissed her cheek, his eyes lingering on her affectionately before he turned. The moment he faced the room, his demeanor shifted instantly from a devoted husband to a stone-cold predator, and the crowd parted for him like the Red Sea as he walked toward the back rooms. Charlotte stood up, smoothing the front of her emerald dress. She felt a bit exposed without Vincent's massive presence shielding her, but she held her head high. She made her way toward the opulent dessert spread, laid out on a long marble table near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. She picked up a small porcelain plate and used silver tongs to select a single, delicate chocolate truffle. "You really think you need that?" The voice was high-pitched, laced with a sickeningly sweet tone of pure venom. Charlotte paused, looking to her right. Chloe Davenport stood there, a glass of champagne in one hand, leaning against the marble table. Her eyes were raking over Charlotte's full figure with naked disgust. Charlotte blinked, taken aback by the sudden hostility. "Excuse me," I said. "Do you really think you need that?" Chloe repeated, her voice carrying just enough to draw the attention of the surrounding guests. She gestured to the truffle on Charlotte's plate. "I mean, looking at you, it seems like you've had enough truffles for a lifetime." The catering staff worked really hard on this spread. It'd be a shame for one person to eat it all. Charlotte felt the blood rush to her cheeks. She was used to quiet judgment, to the side eyes and the whispered comments from the rail-thin mob wives. But outright, public cruelty from a complete stranger. It froze her. "I don't believe we've met," Charlotte said, keeping her voice even, heavily relying on her training as a nurse to stay calm in stressful situations. "I'm Charlotte. I know who you are," Chloe lied smoothly, assuming Charlotte was just some wealthy, pathetic heiress clinging to the Mafia for protection. And I know why you're sitting at the boss's table. But let me give you a little piece of advice, sweetheart. Men like Vincent Moretti, they tolerate girls like you because they have to. Maybe you have money. Maybe you have connections. But when the lights go out, they want a real woman. Someone they aren't embarrassed to be seen with. The air around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. Several made men standing nearby, including the captain who had brought Chloe, suddenly realized what was happening. The color drained from their faces. They were paralyzed, trapped in the gravitational pull of an impending disaster. No one dared to intervene, terrified that stepping into the middle of it would only draw Vincent's lethal attention to them. Charlotte's hands trembled, not from fear, but from a deep, agonizing embarrassment. Her lifelong insecurities, the ones Vincent spent hours kissing away in the dark, flared up like a roaring fire. She felt huge, clumsy, and ugly in her beautiful dress. "You don't know anything about him," Charlotte managed to say, her voice cracking slightly. She set the plate down, no longer having an appetite. "Or about me. Please step aside." But Chloe, misreading the terrified silence of the room as awe of her boldness, decided to double down. She stepped directly into Charlotte's path, blocking her escape. "Oh, did I hurt your feelings?" Chloe mocked, her voice rising dramatically. She reached out and grabbed a thick, buttery croissant from a basket, holding it out to Charlotte like she was feeding a stray animal. "Here, I know how girls like you cope with stress. Why don't you go hide in the corner and chew on this? Leave the big leagues to women who actually take care of themselves." A collective gasp echoed from the nearest tables. The captain who brought Chloe looked like he was going to vomit. He actually took a step backward, abandoning her to her fate. Charlotte stared at the pastry in Chloe's hand, tears of humiliation burning the corners of her eyes. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. She took a breath to tell the girl off, to maintain her dignity, and walk away. But she didn't have to. "What exactly?" A voice rumbled through the room, so deep and chilling it seemed to rattle the crystal glasses on the tables. "Is going on here?" The silence that fell over the Rainbow Room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that precedes an execution. The string quartet in the corner abruptly stopped playing mid-note. Vincent Moretti stood at the edge of the dessert spread. He wasn't looking at Chloe. His dark, furious eyes were locked onto the tears welling in Charlotte's eyes, and then dropped to the pastry Chloe was holding out to her in mockery. Chloe, entirely oblivious to the lethal danger radiating from the man in front of her, turned and gave Vincent a radiant, seductive smile. She tossed her blonde hair over her shoulder, completely dismissing Charlotte. "Mr. Moretti," Chloe purred, stepping closer to him, invading his personal space. "I was just trying to help this guest of yours. She was hovering around the buffet, and I figured I'd offer her a snack before she ate the whole display." She let out a tinkling, cruel laugh, expecting Vincent to join in. Vincent didn't laugh. He didn't blink. He just stared at Chloe, his face completely devoid of emotion. It was the face the underworld knew intimately. It was the face of the butcher. He slowly reached up and unbuttoned his suit jacket. "Guest?" Vincent repeated, the word rolling off his tongue like shattered glass. He moved past Chloe as if she were nothing but air. He walked directly to Charlotte, cupped her beautiful flushed face in his massive hands, and used his thumbs to gently wipe away the stray tear that had escaped her eye. His touch was incredibly tender, a shocking contrast to the lethal tension rolling off his body. "Princess!" Vincent said, his voice loud enough for the entire dead-silent room to hear. "Did this piece of trash just speak to my wife?" The word hung in the air of the Rainbow Room, heavy and suffocating as a wool blanket in August. Wife. Chloe Davenport's smug, heavily contoured face instantly went slack. The glass of champagne in her hand trembled, the pale liquid sloshing over the crystal rim and dripping onto the polished marble floor. Her brain, usually so quick to calculate social hierarchies and financial advantages, entirely short-circuited. She stared at the breathtakingly expensive emerald gown Charlotte was wearing, then at the massive 5-carat Cartier diamond she had somehow completely overlooked on Charlotte's left hand, and finally up into the dead, unblinking eyes of Vincent Moretti. Wife?" Chloe stammered, her high-pitched voice cracking into a pathetic, airy squeak. The blood drained from her face so rapidly she looked like a porcelain doll about to shatter. "Mr. Moretti, I had no idea." "You had no idea," Vincent repeated softly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet rasp of his tone was far more terrifying than a scream. He turned his head slowly, scanning the crowd of frozen billionaires, politicians and mobsters. Dominic. From the shadows near the coat check, a stocky, sharply dressed man in his late 40s practically tripped over his own Italian leather shoes to rush forward. Dominic Rossi was a seasoned captain in the Moretti syndicate, a man who had survived gang wars and federal indictments. Right now, he looked like he was about to burst into tears. He stopped a respectful 5 feet away, bowing his head. "Boss!" Dominic gasped, his chest heaving. "I swear on my mother's grave, I didn't know she was going to speak to her. I told her to stay put." "You brought her," Vincent stated, his eyes never leaving Chloe. "She's nobody, boss. Just a girl from the club. I'm done with her. She's dead to me. Do whatever you want. Please, I beg you, don't hold this against my crew," Dominic pleaded, throwing his hands up in a gesture of total surrender. In the span of 30 seconds, Chloe's entire safety net had evaporated. She was completely, horrifyingly alone. Chloe's chest heaved in a panic. She looked around the opulent room, desperately seeking a friendly face, someone to tell Vincent it was just a joke, a misunderstanding. But the socialites and brokers who usually fawned over her beauty were deliberately looking away. In this room, Chloe's looks were worthless currency. Power was the only language spoken here, and she had just insulted the Queen. "Mr. Moretti, please," Chloe whispered, hot tears of genuine terror spilling over her heavy eyelashes, ruining her perfect makeup. She dropped the pastry she had tried to force on Charlotte. It hit the floor with a pathetic thud. "I was just trying to fit in. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Moretti. I'm so sorry." Vincent finally let go of Charlotte's face, though he kept his large body angled in front of hers, a human shield of bespoke wool and lethal intent. "You work at the Velvet Chandelier, don't you?" Vincent asked, his voice returning to a smooth, businesslike cadence that somehow made the situation feel even more dangerous. Yes, sir. Lead dancer," Chloe sobbed. Vincent reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a single digit and put it on speaker. The room was so quiet that the ringing echoed off the glass walls. On the second ring, a gruff voice answered. "Yeah, boss." "Arthur," Vincent said calmly. "Who is the lead dancer at the Chandelier?" "Girl named Chloe Davenport. Blonde. Traded up from the Miami clubs about 2 years ago." Arthur Pendleton, Vincent's head of security, replied instantly. "Fire her," Vincent ordered. Chloe let out a strangled gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. Done, Arthur said, without missing a beat. And Arthur? Vincent continued, his eyes tracing the terrified contour of Chloe's face. Call the guild. Call the management agencies. I want her blacklisted from every cabaret, every theatre, every modeling agency, and every gentleman's club from Manhattan to Atlantic City. If anyone hires her to so much as pour drinks, I will personally shut their establishment down and burn the building to the foundation. I'll make the calls right now, boss. She won't be able to get a job washing dishes in this state by morning. Wait, please! Chloe shrieked, stepping forward, her survival instincts kicking in. She reached out as if to touch Vincent's arm, but Dominic lunged forward, grabbing her by the wrist and yanking her back with brutal force. Don't you dare touch him, Dominic snarled, his grip bruising her skin. Mr. Moretti, you can't do this. It's my whole life. I have rent. I have... But that's not all, is it, Arthur? Vincent interrupted her, ignoring her pleas entirely. This was the twist the underworld feared about Vincent Moretti. He didn't just hurt you physically. He dismantled your entire existence. You ran the audit on the VIP rooms last week, didn't you? What did you find? There was a slight pause on the line, the rustle of papers. Ah, right. We caught a discrepancy in the High Roller Lounge. Someone has been running a quiet extortion scam, spiking drinks, taking compromising photos of the Wall Street guys, and blackmailing them for crypto transfers. We traced the wallet yesterday. It belongs to Miss Davenport. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Chloe's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees on the cold marble floor, the sheer silver fabric of her dress pooling around her. Her secret was out. She had been stealing from the mob, right under their noses, arrogance blinding her to the surveillance they had on every inch of that club. She owes us $300,000, Arthur added, his voice grim. Vincent hung up the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. He looked down at the weeping, trembling woman at his feet. The swaggering, cruel girl who had tried to humiliate his wife was gone, replaced by a broken criminal who had just realized she was standing in front of the judge, jury, and executioner. You see, Chloe, Vincent said, his voice a low, terrifying hum. You thought my wife was a target because she doesn't fit your narrow, pathetic definition of value. You thought because you starve yourself and wear tight dresses you are untouchable. But you are nothing. You are a thief, a parasite, and a liability. He stepped closer, towering over her. Charlotte is my heart. She is the only light in my miserable life. She saved my life when I was bleeding in the street, while women like you were busy shaking down drunken bankers. I worship the ground she walks on. I would burn this entire city to ash just to keep her warm. Vincent turned his head to Dominic. Take her down to the loading dock. We need to have a conversation about how she is going to repay my money. Dominic's face hardened into a mask of pure compliance. Yes, boss. He hauled Chloe up by her arm. She began to scream, a shrill, hysterical sound of absolute terror, her nails scraping against the marble pillars as Dominic dragged her toward the service elevators. The crowd watched in breathless horror. They knew what happened in the loading docks. They knew Chloe Davenport was about to disappear from New York society forever. But then a soft, trembling hand touched Vincent's forearm. Vincent, stop! The voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the screaming and the tension like a silver blade. Vincent froze. Dominic froze, his grip still tight on a thrashing Chloe. The entire room held its collective breath. No one, absolutely no one, gave Vincent Moretti orders. Charlotte stepped out from behind her husband. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, and her palms were sweating, but she forced her spine perfectly straight. For years, She had hidden in Vincent's shadow, letting him shield her from the whispers and the judgment. She had let her insecurities about her size dictate her confidence. But watching this pathetic, cruel girl sobbing on the floor, Charlotte suddenly realized something profound. Chloe wasn't powerful. Chloe was empty. And Charlotte? Charlotte was loved, fiercely and unconditionally, by the most powerful man in the room. She was the queen, and it was time she started acting like it. "Princess," Vincent murmured, his lethal gaze softening the instant he looked at her. "Let me handle this. You don't need to look at her." "I said stop, Vinny," Charlotte repeated, her voice steadier this time. She stepped completely around him, walking toward where Dominic was holding Chloe. Chloe looked up at Charlotte, her mascara running in thick black rivers down her cheeks. Her eyes were wide with a mix of terror and utter confusion. Why was the woman she just mocked stepping forward? Charlotte looked down at the blonde showgirl. She didn't feel anger anymore. She just felt a profound, exhausting pity. "You told me earlier that men like my husband only tolerate girls like me," Charlotte said quietly, her voice carrying through the silent room. "You said that when the lights go out, they want a real woman, someone who takes care of herself." Chloe whimpered, unable to speak, her chest heaving. "Look at you," Charlotte continued, her tone not cruel, but heavily saturated with truth. "You spend your entire life starving yourself, carving yourself up, and destroying other people just to feel like you have worth. You trade your body for money and power that isn't even yours. You thought my fat was a weakness. But I am comfortable in my skin, Chloe. My husband loves every inch of my body, not because it fits on a magazine cover, but because it belongs to me." Charlotte reached out and gently placed a hand on Dominic's thick forearm. "Let her go, Dominic." Dominic hesitated, his eyes darting to Vincent for confirmation. Vincent watched his wife, a look of overwhelming awe and deep, consuming pride washing over his sharp features. He gave Dominic a barely perceptible nod. Dominic immediately released his grip. Chloe collapsed in a heap, gasping for air, clutching her bruised wrist. Charlotte looked back down at her. "I don't want blood on my dress tonight, and I don't want my husband's charity gala ruined by a thief. You owe Vincent $300,000. Charlotte turned her gaze to Vincent. "How long does she have to leave the city?" Vincent's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. He loved it when she took control. "If she is on a train to Florida by midnight, she keeps her legs. She has exactly 4 years to wire the money to Arthur, with interest. If she ever sets foot in New York again, or if she misses a payment, the loading dock is waiting." Charlotte looked back at Chloe. "You have 3 hours to pack your life, Chloe. You are banished. Go." Chloe didn't need to be told twice. Scrambling to her feet, abandoning her purse and her pride, the former lead showgirl ran for the service doors, her heels echoing frantically down the hallway until the heavy doors swung shut behind her. The room remained dead silent for a long moment. Then slowly, as if a spell had been broken, the string quartet resumed playing a soft Mozart piece. The guests, deeply terrified and aggressively eager to pretend nothing had happened, rushed back into quiet, polite conversations, their eyes firmly averted from the dessert table. Vincent stepped up behind Charlotte, wrapping his massive arms around her waist, pulling her soft, lush body back against his solid chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling the sweet vanilla scent of her perfume. "You never cease to amaze me, Mrs. Moretti," he whispered against her skin, his voice thick with raw devotion. Charlotte leaned back into his embrace, closing her eyes, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't worth the mess, Vinny. Besides, I wanted to go home anyway. Vincent chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated against her back. Your wish is my command, Princess. Let's go home. An hour later, they were far away from the sparkling lights of the Rainbow Room, safely enclosed in their sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park. Charlotte stood in the center of their massive master bedroom, the emerald gown pooling in a pile of expensive silk at her feet. She stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in just her lace lingerie, looking at her reflection. She saw the curve of her stomach, the thickness of her thighs, the soft roundness of her arms. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel the urge to look away. Vincent walked up behind her, having discarded his suit jacket and tie, his white dress shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest to reveal the faint, jagged scars she had stitched up 5 years ago. He met her eyes in the mirror. He didn't see flaws. He saw a masterpiece. He dropped to his knees behind her. Charlotte's breath hitched as Vincent pressed a soft, reverent kiss to the back of her thick thigh, his large hands resting lovingly on the curve of her hips. You were magnificent tonight, Vincent murmured, pressing another kiss to her hip bone, tracing the soft lines of her body as if he were studying holy scripture. You are magnificent every night. Charlotte ran her fingers through his dark hair, looking at their reflection. The ruthless mob boss on his knees, worshipping the fat, beautiful woman who held his heart in the palm of her hand. I know. Charlotte smiled softly. I finally know. That wraps up the unbelievable, dramatic saga of Charlotte and Vincent, a powerful reminder that true devotion goes far beyond superficial standards, and crossing the wrong woman in New York can cost you everything. If you loved this real-life mafia romance drama, please drop a like, smash that share button, and subscribe to the channel for more crazy true stories. What did you think of Charlotte's ultimate revenge? Let me know in the comments below. See you next time.